So I've needed to record every single day between now and when I last recorded, which is like 2 days. It's the 26th. So last time I recorded, talked to my birth mother. The next day after that, she sent me all the stuff, right? And I recorded and I read the stuff and whatever. Freaking went after that and I pulled out all my journal entries so that I could find from like age 17 through like 24, 25-ish. I pulled out just tons and tons of like my old poetry and stuff like that. I know how I felt. I know what was going on. But I haven't been able to talk about it at all because life's been very busy and loud. And every time I try to do anything, something goes on. And it's just like, I had some doubts for a little bit about my transness because I was very sure about the lesbian thing. But, you know, my girlfriend asked me, were you sure about the lesbian thing because you were sure that you were a lesbian, or were you sure that you were a lesbian because you knew how you felt about women and wanting them to like you and that you were attracted to them? I was like, well, obviously attraction to women. And she's like, then you're still probably right that it's just that you didn't know being trans exists. I felt like, what if my dysphoria is not actually bad enough to be trans or something? Like I get upset. I can't think about it too much. But am I really so dysphoric as to be like, I don't know, truly trans? Like, is it the high enough a degree? And have I had it long enough? Like, I say I can remember instances from when I was a kid, but can I remember when I was a kid having panic attacks that specifically would be attributed to dysphoria? And I realized that's why I'm talking to my birth mother. I realized that was what I was looking for, was for us to talk about when I was younger, whether it's bad or it's good, so that I can think about those instances. Because I'll bring up a situation and then she'll retort with the situation. And we are starting to bring up situations that are situations I hadn't even thought about yet. And in trying to explain to her how I feel, part of it is just this solidifying of me finding myself. It's like sometimes the recommendation for learning a thing is teaching it to someone. I feel like that's what I'm doing. Now, do I expect her to ever accept me? Hell no. I don't expect that. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Do I expect that we'll never yell or scream at each other again? No. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm not expecting like some miraculous change from her. I'm expecting myself to change. And it's facilitating change. I talked to my therapist yesterday morning, went through all of that, and her basic advice was, the way that you guys are talking is very abusive. You shouldn't be doing this. If this is how it's going to go, this is abusive. Like, this is very abusive. With this screaming and the, like, she's like, this is just going to trigger you and trigger you and trigger you to having worse PTSD issues when we're trying to work you through therapy to have less PTSD issues. So, you know, there's that. And then, you know, I talked to my brother, and he said he had to set conversations that were allowed to be talked about and what weren't. And I read my old stuff, and I read my feelings and things from when I was younger. And not only did I want to know exactly how I felt then, but I wanted to compare it to how I feel now. The young person that wrote that stuff was so utterly and completely alone and just desperate, like so desperate for someone to give a shit, and yet so full of hatred for the people who were trying to give a shit, because they were giving a shit in all the wrong ways. They weren't actually helping, and there was all this frustration with the fact that how can they not be helping? How can they put in this much work and it be for like nothing? How can I be putting in this much work and it be for nothing? Like there was this frustration and this constant loneliness, the overwhelming depression. I was coming out of I was starting to try to search for sanity, and I was still self-harming and dealing with suicide attempts and things, and it's just like I was in a not good place. Like, very not good. And I'm not saying I'm in a great place now, but I'm in a better place than that. I'm not in an awesome place. I'm not. But it's not what it was. And I don't feel the same things that I felt then. And I've changed a lot from that kid who was so hurt all the time, just hurt and panicking and knowing something's wrong but not knowing what it is, so not wanting anyone to know about it because you wouldn't be able to explain it anyway. There's no way to verbalize something that you don't know. You just know something's not right. I've never been a big words matter person anyway. I've been action, so I think of all the examples of things that I did. And discussing things that I did is helpful to me. For instance, again, I've looked back in my past and I'm like, oh, was I actually interested in boyish things? But what I've been looking for recently is instances of something that I could genuinely attribute to dysphoria, and genuinely that would be the likely thing going on there, instead of it just being I was upset because of like an abusive thing going on at the time, or I was upset because I felt guilty about something at the time. I'm looking for I was upset solely because of my form, solely because what I visually was seeing wasn't making sense to me. And I have some of that. I couldn't look in the mirror. I still struggled with the mirror. Supposedly teenagers look in the mirror all the time. I did not as a teenager. I did not like looking in the mirror at all. Sorry if there's loudness, but I've waited 2 days to say this, so I'm saying it. I freaking, by talking to my birth mother, am accomplishing 2 giant major things that I really personally would like to accomplish. And the first one is exploring myself. And that's a big thing that I just have been avoiding my entire life. So much. When I was younger, almost all of my everything was about, please take the sin away. Oh God, have mercy on me, a sinner. You know, just take it away. Make it stop. Make it stop. I don't know what's going on, but it's obviously sin, and just make it go away. And just tortured. I'm a monster. I'm a terrible, horrible, horrifying thing. I'm, this just disgusting, revolting, just horrifyingly bad stuff I said about myself. constantly, every single day, and I thought I was doing the right thing by doing that, by ripping myself apart, that was the most godly thing that I could do, was being tortured by my sin, because I was freaking messed up when I was a kid, and growing up, didn't tell anybody about, what was going on with me because I couldn't verbalize it, so I just told myself over and over again how terrible I was, because I couldn't speak. But I could do things. Some of my actions when I was younger aren't just, oh, I couldn't look in a mirror, or oh, I liked this thing, or oh, I didn't like this thing. I started to realize that other kids didn't live the same way as me right around when I hit puberty. And I hit puberty very young. And I got really messed up. Between my changing body and me trying to, cut pubic hair off with my scissors and stuff and everything, because I was ashamed because my brothers didn't have pubic hair. The other little girls at school didn't have pubic hair. Even the other little boys at school didn't have pubic hair. Why did I have it? It didn't make sense to me. Why was I changing? And my mother was explaining to me when she caught me doing that. She would teach me how to shave my underarms. She's like, here, don't do that. Do this. This will help. You're just turning into a woman. And that made me so upset. To be turning into a woman upset me. And puberty young runs in my family. Like, my mother hit puberty young. My grandmother hit puberty young. My grandmother flat out told me it just runs in the family before she passed away on my birth mother's side. It's just a thing that happens. But I didn't understand what was happening. And the only thing I did understand is that the more that this happened, the more I would turn into a woman. And other kids didn't live the way that I did. And I was just jealous and bitter about it all the time. And I was bitter all the time that I was turning into a woman. And I couldn't do anything about it. And I remember I had to start wearing training bras. And I was so ashamed. And I was so miserable about it. But I tried not to let on because I didn't want anyone to feel bad. But I was so upset about training bras. Just miserable about it. And I didn't remember that until I was talking with my birth mother. And then, we were talking about things that happened when I was younger. And, trips to Florida came up. I was like, I'm here on this beach with the ocean water and the seashells and the sunshine, and what would I do? I would dig a big hole in the sand and curl up in it and hide. And I didn't want anyone to see me because I was in a swimsuit, and I still have issues with swimsuits to this day. But I love swimming. I love swimming. So sometimes I would go swim, but the majority of the time I just wanted to be in a t-shirt and shorts. And I got to a point where my swimsuit, instead of being a one-piece, very decently young, I couldn't stand being in a one-piece swimsuit. I just couldn't handle it. And I didn't know why. I didn't know what was wrong about it or whatever. And my mother suggested me wearing a sports bra with basically pajama boxer short things for a swimsuit. And I wore that, and at least I could have shorts that way. And it was a very weird swimsuit because it wasn't a swimsuit at all, but it was something that made me feel less horrified at people seeing me than a one-piece swimsuit. And my mother thought I had modesty issues. She thought I was very virginal, and I didn't know that. I didn't know that that was what she thought. But I also didn't know why I was acting that way. I didn't know what was going on. My mother thought I was abstinent because I, prized that. I didn't want a husband. I didn't want a boyfriend. I didn't want none of that. So I wasn't looking to get any of that at all. I had no interest None. And it wasn't like because I was trying to be holy. I would take these little test things about find out about yourself because my mother, thought those kinds of things were good for helping you get to know yourself. And so there'd be the thing on like, how do you feel about lying? How do you feel about, your schoolwork? How do you feel about, making friends? How do you feel about abstinence? Would be on there. And I would always score 20 out of 20. I was the most hardcore abstinent person in the world because I didn't want a husband. So all of it was super easy for me to be like, yeah, no, I don't care about that. Nope, I don't want that. Nope, I don't want that. Like, straight across the board, just every single time I ever took them when I was a teenager. If the abstinence thing was on there, it was just straight up, nope, none of that applies to me. So my mother just thought I was hardcore, like into being virtuous or something. My mother thought, oh, this kid's upset. And she thought, oh, well, I'll try to force this situation where a kid can hang out with my kid, and maybe my kid just needs friends, or something like that. And so then, if she even, was noticing enough to try to help, it was always the wrong thing. But I never verbalized what was going on, so I don't know how it could have ever been the right thing. And even if I did verbalize it, we lived in a very strict little isolated, like, religious area, community thing. Like, there's no way that it would have even been something that someone could understand. Like, me being transgender was not even something that would have been, like, definable when I was a kid. There was no such thing as transgender. I don't think anyone knew at all, like not even a single person, that women could become men and be transsexual that way. The only transsexuals that were known about were, again, men dressing up like women. And I don't think anyone thought a man could actually be a woman. I just thought they dressed up like them. I genuinely, when I was a kid, cannot remember ever anyone even remotely having a clue about any of it. And even when I first encountered trans men, the majority of them were, like, absolutely in stealth. And it wasn't, like, a thing to be proud of, except for by, like, 2 people. Out of an entire freaking community of, LGBT, there were 2 who were proud of it, and then the rest were all in stealth. And it was like, just not like how it is now at all. Not even remotely. There was no knowledge. That's the most frustrating thing. There was, like, no knowledge. Like, I see this tortured kid hiding all the time, just constantly hiding. There's no way that kid could have ever had the knowledge to know what was going on. So the kid just blamed themselves because there seemed to be no reason for this to be going on. So obviously it must just be the common denominator, which is yourself. Something's just wrong with you, and you're being terrible, and you're just terrible for having some non-existent thing wrong with you. I was so different. And if there's anything that I'm getting from these, talks with my birth mother at this point, it's how different I was. I was just so very not like the other children. And I'm not trying to be like, ooh, look at me, I was so special or something. I'm saying I was just not like them in so many ways. And in some ways, I did try to be like them. Like, again, I did play sometimes. But I spent so much time alone, just associating into books and movies and video games, trying to be somewhere else, be somewhere one else. I loved role-playing games because I got to be a different person. Like, I, at one point, probably owned almost every single RPG ever made for the PlayStation 1. Because I just wanted to be them. Oh my gosh, I just realized. Star Ocean 2. I loved that game. I loved Star Ocean. I liked being the boy more than the girl. You could choose 2 different storylines, and there was so much that game was amazing. And you could, like, discover allies to come along with you in your fight, and you could go steal from the village and then leave the village, and it would save who you'd stolen from and go back in. I would take the time to go and steal every single thing from every single village. That took a lot of effort. Anyway, the big thing is, I liked being the boy. There was this space boy or whatever, and then there was this girl who had, like, blue hair, and I loved the girl's blue hair, and I thought she was cute. I thought she was, pretty attractive. She wasn't the most attractive person in the whole thing, but she was pretty attractive. And then there was this boy, and he was so cool, and he had this cool jacket, and I don't know, when I get a wardrobe, I should get a cool jacket. I would like that. I would like to have a cool jacket. I had a leather jacket once that had a blue stripe going down the edge, and then it was just, a black leather jacket besides that. I loved that thing. I wore it so much that it got holey and stuff, and I eventually had to throw it out because it was so torn up. I should do that. I really like cool leather jacketness like that. I always did, even when I was a kid. Anyway, the point is I really liked being the boy, because you had the option of choosing between the boy and the girl. Loved that game. It was an excellent game. Except it was a little too RNG with the, like, crafting stuff and the, like, cooking and so on. I needed to say that I'm looking for me, and I figured out that's what I'm doing, and I'm sorry, someone's up crinkling stuff and getting into the fridge and stuff, and that's the noises that you're hearing. That I'm not going to edit out of the video because I don't edit any of these videos, so yay. Anyway, I just got on the bed, that's why the camera bounced. Anyway. There's not been any quiet, just me awake and no one else time for me to record. And so you've missed all the raw thoughts about all of this, or emotions, or however you want to say that, because I couldn't record for 2 days. But I am finding out a lot about myself, which is helping me a lot. Like, sometimes I get a little scared of, say, for instance, my voice changing. If my voice gets too much deeper, what if it, like, scared me or something, that so much change was happening so fast? Like, if my voice is already this deep, am I going to have, like, one of those crazy deep voices? Or does that mean that my voice isn't going to change much? Like, if I take testosterone, it's like, on the one hand, it would be beneficial to take testosterone. Like, this has been told to me. But at the same time, there is still a tiny part of me that's like, I don't know what I'm gonna get. Except that there's a 50% chance I'm gonna go bald. Because I mean, I already have this hairline going on here, so, you know, with this more squared hairline or whatever. So, it's like, sometimes I'm like, can't I just have the bottom growth and the fat redistribution and, you know, my face getting more male structured and things like that? Can't I just have the Adam's apple and, you know, the confidence and all that and just skip some of this other part? But I don't get to decide that. My body decides that. My genetics decide that. And the unfortunate truth is I have a lot of crap genes. It is what it is with that. So I don't have massively high expectations. But I do feel like I would not be able to stand it going back. Like, even just having this beard, I don't think that I could stand going back to not having it. Like, even just the slightest bit of muscle that I've got going on here, that I've lost 1 more inch off, measured again, and there's 1 less inch around the tummy, and there's still the more muscle definition going on in my upper body. For me, exercising so much. Like, I'm making progress. And it wouldn't feel like progress if I wasn't actually enjoying looking more male. That's the really big thing, is part of the reason I wanted to do all this exercising while I'm doing my therapy anyway, before I go on testosterone, the reason I want to go slow is I wanted to see how I felt at the more male I would start looking. And I just yearn for it. And it's like, you know, makes me feel a little bit of hope and happiness. It doesn't make me feel more like upsetting or depressed, you know. Like, the more broad and big my shoulders get and stuff, the better, versus, you know, oh, am I missing not working on, you know, trying to have like hips and a waist or something. I don't really want that. I want to look masculine. Like, people are starting to notice hairy legs when I go out in public because I am wearing shorts because it's hot out. And, you know, I don't want them to think I'm a girl. And for the first time in my life, that doesn't instantly like plague me with 1,000 pounds of guilt and terror. And it's so strange not to feel all the guilt and the terror. Instead, it's almost like, it's not like awesome and amazing and wonderful. It's just feels like progress. I'm not as trapped. I have felt like I could never handle the pressure my entire life. And this doesn't feel like pressure. It's interesting because my birth mother was like, seems like you've surrounded yourself in your life with people who just accept that you want to be transgender. And I'm like, nah, my spouse has had some very large issues about me looking male. And my dad's definitely not for it. And I've got a couple of siblings who aren't for it. And stuff like that. Even besides just her, you know, there's still people in my life who aren't for it. It's just the majority of people in my life, especially ones that I can choose, don't really care one way or the other. it's not important to them what gender I am. It's important to them if I'm happy. They just don't give a shit one way or the other. And they're not pressuring me to become male. That's the really big thing. I have been pressured and pressured and pressured all my life to be girl, to be more girly, to act less boyish, that, oh, you look so much better with long hair, and it doesn't matter how miserable long hair makes you. You gotta have the long hair because that's what makes everyone happy, even though you hate it. Just that, all by itself. You can't do anything about the rest of your body, but you could at least do something about your hair, except no one wants you to. And there's always been all this pressure. So much pressure my whole life. And, like, people aren't putting pressure on me to be a guy. I just feel like I'm making progress the more guy I am. And I don't feel like I'm less me, I feel like I'm more me. I feel like it's this big giant thing I've been avoiding and avoiding and avoiding my entire life. And I don't fault the kid who was ignorant about trans issues for avoiding it. Like, I don't expect that kid to have been able to have adult processing abilities, and I don't expect that kid to have been able to verbalize what was happening. I don't begrudge that child all of their, like, angst and struggle, despite the fact that I traumatized my own self a bunch of times. I have PTSD from things that I did to myself. But I'm not doing that to myself anymore. And I can verbalize now. It takes a little effort, and it takes me re-explaining things to myself several times to try to figure out what I'm trying to say. But I can get there, and I couldn't get there. I'm amazed at the difference, and sometimes I worry. I'm like, well, what if I'm not really a guy? What if I'm not really dysphoric? What if I'm not? What if? So many what ifs. But honestly, they're really easy to dismiss at this point, for the most part. Now, am I still sad about stuff that happened when I was younger? Definitely. You can not hold it against and still be sad about it. My younger years were pretty freaking miserable for me. And my situations that were miserable might not have been miserable for someone else. Someone else might have been fine in that situation, or even happy in that situation. But some of those situations were just utterly miserable for me, even if someone else in the room was enjoying themselves. I was so miserable all the time. I just wanted to wear giant baggy clothes so I didn't have a body. I wore these big frumpy sweaters and big frumpy fleeces and, pullovers and stuff like that. Loose clothes, because I didn't want to have a body. And you don't remember things the same way unless someone else who was there is talking about it with you. And it sucks that some things are very triggery about speaking to my birth mother. And so many negative associations are there. And there are things that are upsetting about my birth mother. I don't think she will ever actually think that she abused her kids. Whatever. She's not going to ever accept that. I don't want her to accept that because then she can beat herself up about it. I want her to accept that so that she'll accept that part of how we grew up and our experiences and what turned us into the people that we are now today was based on experiences we had as when we were younger. And maybe there'll be some understanding there. I don't want, I don't know, I'm not a very vindictive person. I don't want to talk about her worthless husband, but I don't know, my birth mother and my birth father, they do things that hurt me, and they did things that hurt me, and I still talk to them. And I know a lot of people who would just write them off or not have contact with them anymore and stuff, and I don't know, that's not for me. It doesn't work for me. And maybe some people shake their head at me for it and act like I'm self-harming by even talking to them. I don't know. I know my birth mother has some serious psych issues that she'll probably never get help for, and I know that exasperates things. We were talking about auditory processing disorder because she might have that. So, because she can handle multiple noise sources coming from multiple directions. Well, when you're raising a bunch of kids and there's, not just one kid by itself, that's probably harder with auditory processing disorder. So, your brain just sort of shorts when there's too much noise coming from too many different sources, background and foreground, and you just can't understand any of it. It just turns into utter gibberish inside your head. I want to know me. I don't care if I have to suffer to know me. I care if I know me. I don't care if my mother and I are screaming at each other and that's not good and that's abusive behavior and whatever. I don't care if I'm getting to know me. I will be patient with it. Because me is who I'm looking for. The other thing that I'm getting out of this is that it's making things less tenuous, which means that I can try to have more of a relationship with my baby sister. Since my birth mother is living with my baby sister right now, it obviously makes things more awkward trying to reach out to and talk to my baby sister if, there's like this hostile energy going on between my birth mother and I. And my baby sister has been like, I'm if you're trans, I'm fine with that. I'm just a little sad because, we had that sister bond or whatever. We had a deeper bond than with the boys. And I told her, I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I don't think it's because you can't bond with a brother. I think it's that you and I are a lot more similar than the other two. We both like some of the same interests that the boys aren't as into, and we both like talk in some of the same ways that the boys don't really do, being other brothers, the other brothers, because, obviously everyone closest in age to her are all brothers, except basically me, so, because she's 14 years younger than my baby brother, so, she was the surprise, that's why her name is Joy, but, she's also the one that experiences life in some of the same ways as me. Where if you don't know what's wrong, you go inward instead of out some of the time. And I don't know, I feel like there's a deeper bond there or understanding because of that. I don't know, she's a sweetheart. She's a very good-hearted person, my baby sister. She always has been. Even when she was a kid, she never could stand it if people were upset with each other or arguing or being mean to each other. She always wanted people to be nice to each other and kind. She's very gentle-hearted that way for the most part. I mean, every once in a while she'll play wrestle or something. I mean, look at who her siblings are. You know, but I mean, she's not a genuinely aggressive person. She's aggressively loving. And she sees that as a flaw sometimes, I think, because it means that she's sensitive. But I don't see it as a flaw. I think it makes her a better human being than a lot of people are, so, including myself. Like, being able to be sensitive to other people around you's, you know, happiness. See, I take care of people's needs of, oh, you need water right now. You need food in your belly. You need, you know, shelter out of the rain. Whatever it is, that's what I go for. She sees people's emotional state and wants to help that and wants to help them. And it's not that she never notices a physical need and helps it. It's just a different kind of bent, but it's still there. And it's very awesome of her that she does that for people. She can't even play her Sims game without trying to take care of her little Sims people. So, anyway. I hope that in the future, you know, my relationship with my baby sister stays solid, even though I'm transitioning, because I think that's something she's been afraid about, is that it wouldn't stay solid and it wouldn't stay, like, you know, like this close bond and stuff, and I don't want that, like, at all, so. But yeah. I'm glad I figured it out, though, because it can be exhausting and upsetting trying to discuss anything with my birth mother, especially with the walls that are there. But we agreed about what walls were there, and we agreed we just flat out disagreed on a few things, and we should probably not talk about them because it's just going to make strife. And she agreed to try to be patient if I'm having, you know, PTSD or dysphoria and stuff like that, and I just can't pay attention to what she's saying. And it's not that I'm trying to, like, disregard her or something. I just am struggling, and to try to have less long of conversations. It was 3 hours instead of 5 hours, and honestly, it wasn't intended to be that long. We just kept wandering off onto tangents that were, like, examples from when I was growing up and stuff, but honestly, that helped me. So I'm not, like, upset that it took a long time to do that, because we didn't yell one single time. There was no yelling, there was no anger stuff going on or lashing out, or, I mean, she said the blame thing a couple of times, but again, I think she has some sort of, like, an obsession about the blame thing, so I'm not really going to expect someone who's obsessed with a thing to never mention it. I mean, again, maybe that's not what someone else would do, but that's how I feel about it. I don't know. My baby sister said she might try Elder Scrolls Online with me. She has a lot of negative associations with World of Warcraft, which, I mean, at this point in time, half the people who've ever played World of Warcraft probably have some sort of negative association with World of Warcraft. Let's be honest. But, you know, people come back to it for every expansion for a little bit just to see the content, so whatever. My spouse will probably never stop playing that game, and I've got other family members who will probably never stop playing that game, so my family tends to be very long distance, and playing games together, it helps us stay in touch, so it's a way of being connected and being able to spend time together, even if it's in another world. But yeah. Anyway, I wish I could have recorded yesterday, or could have recorded the day before yesterday. Either one. I knew a lot more what I wanted to try to get across, and I knew a lot more what my emotions were with it, and now I'm pretty much like shut down and no emotions really, so that sucks. But at least I got to say it at all. I couldn't just keep waiting to be able to talk about it. And I probably missed a bunch of stuff. Because so much has happened over the last several days. I mean, there's been a lot going on with trying to help everybody understand each other and accept each other's boundaries and everything, just in general, so whatever. Anywho, at least I got to say anything. Even if the quality might not be that awesome, at least I got to say something. So that's good. Anywho. Doot doot doot.